Hello, this is Aditi, Raising World Children. And today with us, we have Liz Nonamaker. And she is a marketing strategist, but she has an amazing story about her grandparents to share with us. So, Liz, tell us a little bit about yourself first.
Well, she said my name is Liz Nonamaker. I live in Sarasota, Florida. I am the mom of two grown girls and a wife of one grown husband. And I am, well, sort of grown husband. And I have a dog mom. I have three golden retrievers right now. And we picked up a puppy last week. One of our oldest one has cancer, almost 13, and then we have a 5-year-old, and now we have a new puppy, so who's like 9 weeks old and is a mischief. And I run wickedlychic.com and dedicatedcreatives.com. So I work for myself, and I love to read and travel, and I don't know, just enjoy life.
That's wonderful. It's so wonderful that you are so welcoming to the silent lot in our lives that are your dogs. Oh, there he goes. How sweet. So we were discussing actually a bit about your grandparents, and you told me they have been through some unique challenges, so to say the least, in life. And tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, well, I am a first generation on my mother's side. I have an interesting story. My grandparents on my mom's side are from Vienna. Actually, my grandmother was from a small town in Austria on the Czech border.
Mhm.
And my grandmother was raised Catholic. My grandfather was Jewish. And they fell in love because they worked in competing kosher butcher shops in Vienna back in the late 30s. And at that time, Hitler was coming into power, and my grandfather was able to see what was going to happen. And a lot of people didn't. They just couldn't believe, he was saying, he wanted to eliminate all the Jews. And, everybody was saying, how could that possibly be? There's just no way. It's just never going to happen. And so my grandparents were able to get a visa to go to Italy, and then to London, and then to Montreal, and then to New York. And so they started out in the United States with my grandfather. I mean, had no job, they had no family. My mother was a baby. She was born on the way. She was born in London. And they came over on a ship from Liverpool, which was bombed on the way back to go pick up more people. And they came from nothing and didn't speak the language and built a life in a strange country because they could not stay where they were. And it turned out my great-grandparents didn't believe that anything was going to happen, and they stayed behind in Vienna, and my grandfather was able to get them and his little brother out at the very last minute. But the majority of my family was killed at some point during the war. And to top it off, my grandmother was Catholic, and she married a Jewish man, converted to Judaism, and two of her sisters married Nazis. So there you go. Interesting story.
Definitely. Life is so full of surprises, and
Yes.
it is so important to learn from the history that we have faced, and history is not just what we read in books, it is what the stories that we come from, what our grandparents or our friends' grandparents have faced, so that we can learn and, not make the same kind of mistakes. And it is so overwhelming to be in connection with someone, to see someone who is connected to someone who's been through something so horrific, because those times I've only read in books were so horrible and such a tragic time in our history. So how do you feel I'm sure you've heard the story a number of times, and because these stories they thankfully do not die, they keep getting repeated within the household. So how did you feel growing up when you heard these stories?
Well, at the time that I was growing up, we didn't really talk about it.
Okay.
And neither did anyone else. I mean, things didn't get started, So I was born in the 60s.
Okay.
So that time it was only 20 years, it had only been 20 years ago. So it was still so new. And so my family that was able to come to the United States, nobody wanted to talk about it. They just wanted to sweep it under the rug. I mean, how did you deal with that? I mean, you didn't really have so let's say even if you had mental health people, they could help you back then. What would they say? Like, how do you help somebody like that? You can't. And so they just tried to just go on with their lives, even though, family members were gone. And it's really only been in the past 20 or 25 years that people have talked about it.
Okay. So then how did you react once you finally realized that, okay, they have these stories and, because eventually, of course, like you said, that it's only recently they started talking about it. So then how did it change you personally?
It's in your veins. I mean, it runs through you. I mean, it's the pain that runs through you. I mean, I can't even hardly talk about it without crying, but it's true.
Yes. It is difficult. And when you say that, I mean, there is an assumption that I made that, they would be willing to talk about it, but it is the first time that I'm learning that there is another sort of reaction where people prefer not to talk about it. They would be like, no,
Well, I think so. And I think, even now, you still hear people say, oh, it didn't happen, or,
yes,
that kind of thing. Or it's going to happen again, and, all the Jews are...
Yes, it is. It's a very troubling time again right now.
Yeah,
sweep that under the rug, so to say. But yes, I believe that where people stand up and people talk about differences and stuff, I think we should all be good.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I'm not afraid, or I don't think, and I think, nowadays we have then, if you were Jewish, they took away your radio, they took away every way that you had that you could possibly communicate or learn anything. Now we're so connected. So I think it's a different, a different time. And but it's still, you grow up with it, your kids grow up with it. I mean, it's just,
Would you have preferred them talking about it? I mean, this is just me being curious, but because my family, we went through the Gulf War. Like, we had to leave everything and we moved to India. Like, we were there. But my family is a family of talkers. So it's like they ended up making jokes about it, that this is what happened. And, because thankfully we weren't hurt much. I mean, that was just it was very limited compared to what happened with Nazis and stuff like that. But what happened with Saddam Hussein was very minuscule compared in terms of the number of people who were affected. But they would be like, okay, you know what, my brother was born that year itself, so they were like, oh, he brought Saddam Hussein to Kuwait, because they would just make jokes about it and make it like how lighthearted fun about it. But I used to really, now when I'm a parent, I often tell my friends this, that it is so difficult for me to comprehend what my parents must have gone through in those 2 months that we were in Kuwait during the war. I mean, thankfully Iraqis were very generous towards Indians. They didn't have any issues with them. But still, there's always this fear, because you might get in the middle of something, or people might enter your homes, because they were going house to house checking for Kuwaitis and trying to loot houses, and which they did, which meant we didn't lose everything. But there was that constant fear. And for me to think, even with the hurricanes now, I think about how the families are affected and they've lost everything, and it's so difficult. So I don't know if I wonder if, talking about it positively, or talking about it, just getting the things out there is another way maybe to heal quicker, or, I wonder.
I don't know, because we didn't talk about it. I didn't really understand why my grandmother, kind of had resentment toward, I mean, she had a lot of resentment toward her siblings, except for the youngest one, and he ended up dying at 18 in World War II. But I didn't really completely understand it. So, I mean, I can't go back, and it was just a different time where you just, and then by the time I really understood it, I didn't really know anybody. I mean, I didn't really know anybody whose family was like mine.
Had gone
I
through.
mean, all the other Jewish people I knew, were from the United States. The only time I really realized we were kind of different was when my grandmother was living with us, and my grandfather died when I was 10, and my grandmother was living with us, and she had a very heavy accent. And I was dating this stupid boy, and the stupid boy called me up and said to me, I tried to call you earlier today, but all I was able to reach was your maid. And I was like, a maid? Like, we don't have a maid. Like, what are you talking about? We don't have a maid. It was my grandmother. And I never really thought about the fact that she had a really heavy accent. I mean, I just never really,
That is just...
it's just how it was.
That's just sad to hear, where people judge others based on their accent or how they look, or it's ridiculous. I mean, people are people at the end of the day. We all have skin, we all have bones, we all have blood. I mean, even the color of our skin is just pigmentation. It's science. It doesn't affect. Our accents are based on our environments,
Right.
Just sad that, people in those times, and even today, I think a lot of people haven't grown in a very weird aspect. I feel that they still look at you and then they make assumptions about what kind of person you are.
Right.
Often, more than often wrong,
Right.
There are some stereotypes which hold true, but that is just because, that is a way of life. It is not something to judge someone by, because nowadays, like we talk about at Raising World Children all the time, is that, people are same yet different, and different and yet same.
Exactly.
So, yes, anyway. Is there anything positive? Is a positive message that you would like to leave us with?
You can get through. Well, there's no excuses.
Oh, yes, definitely.
There's no excuse. I mean,
beautiful.
There's no excuses. I mean, I have in my mirror, in my bedroom, in my mirror, I have a picture of my grandfather. And it was like, there's no excuses. I mean, you can do whatever you want to do. I mean, I just had a Zoom chat with someone from the Dedicated Creatives group who does audio stuff and podcast stuff, and he's blind. And he's been blind since birth. And I think he's going to reach out to you to talk to you. But how cool is that? I mean, what is your excuse?
Definitely.
What's your excuse?
I wonder about that all the time, that,
yeah.
How do people justify to themselves when they do something wrong, or, it's just sad. It's so totally it's a sad situation.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Liz, for sharing your story with us.
You're welcome.
That you are so amazing at what you do. Would you like to leave our listeners and our viewers with any contact information so that they can get in touch with you and maybe share their own story, or have just a chat with you and figure out how you both can work together?
Yep. Just the best place to connect with me is in my Dedicated Creatives group on Facebook. And either you can leave the link, or just go to Facebook and look under Dedicated Creatives and join the group. And it's a good place to connect with me. I'm always talking. I just was talking in there. So I'm always talking about something.
If you're watching this, that's where I connected with Liz, and she's wonderful. She has awesome things for the group, and is wonderful in all the information that she provides. Thank you once again, Liz, for sharing your heartwarming story with us. Our heart goes out to you, and I hope that your family keeps healing constantly and slowly.
Thank you.
For everyone else, we wish you all a wonderfully positive day. Make sure to like and subscribe for more such real stories and real people with us at Raising World Children.